Welcome back. We're going to take a look at traits of leaders. So I always start with posing a question to the class. Why are some persons good leaders while others are not? Take a minute to think about this and jot down some ideas. What makes them good? What makes them bad? Now that you've had a chance, we're going to take a look at what makes them good. And these are some of the ideas that were brainstormed from prior students. That a good leader has concern for other people. They're confident, they're committed, they motivate people. On the bad side, they have less concern for people. They use power for the wrong reasons, too controlling. So here's a question for thought. Are leaders born or made? Are they just naturally born and they're leaders? Or can you actually learn to become a leader? This lesson looks at leadership traits and behaviors. We're going to start with the great person theory and studies. The great person theory is also known as the great man theory. This theory believed that leaders were naturally born, and that in order to find out leadership characteristics, that they could go back and find successful leaders and try and figure out what made them successful. A study by Jim Coase and Barry Posner of over 3,400 managers, for example, found that followers rather consistently admired leaders who were honest, competent, forward-looking, inspiring, and credible. Extending that a little bit further, Kirkpatrick and Edwin Locke further identified more traits, which you'll see in the next set of slides. Now, studies found that physical characteristics had no bearing. Followers consistently admired leaders with those specific traits which we're going to look at. Before we continue, I'd just like to look at the great man theory or great person theory and the assumptions behind it. Here's a link which I'll include in the YouTube video below so that you guys can also look along and see the video. It's a short one, about about just under 3 minutes, that goes through what the great person theory is. Great leaders are born, not made. They inherit the innate qualities and traits to lead. And secondly, the second assumption is that great leaders will arise when there is a great need at their calling. The limitations of the theory, because it was called great man theory, is that this theory did not involve women. There was no scientific proof, and leadership can be taught. At least that's what we expect. And that also explains why you're in this course, because there's a belief that you can learn leadership skills. Fourth, environmental and situational factors impact the individual's leadership success. So what were those traits of successful leaders? They identified 8. Drive, having higher energy, initiative, and they are tenacious. Self-confident, leaders trust themselves. Creativity, creative and original thinking. Cognitive ability, intelligent to integrate and interpret information, and I suppose you could extend that to problem solving. Business knowledge, know the industry and its technical foundations. Have motivation, influence others to achieve and share goals. Flexibility, to adapt to the needs of followers and demands of situation. Honesty and integrity, trustworthy, honest, predictable, and dependable. Also mirrored in the characteristics that we found in that first study done by Barry Posner. I'd like for you to pause and take a look back at your original list. How many of these 8 did you catch? These should be interesting. Continuing forward a little bit further, we take a look at leadership styles. So going beyond the great person theory, we have to take a look at other factors as we develop over time. The leadership style is a recurring pattern of behaviors exhibited by a leader. Studies focused on 2 dimensions of style. 1 was a concern for tasks to be completed or accomplished, and 2, the concern for people doing the work. So what exactly does this look like? Well, taking a look here, this is a Blake-Mouton grid. And while you can go off and take a look at different textbooks, you'll find different material. This is not one set standard, but generally what you will find is that the variables on the x and y axes are consistent, that they are looking at concern for production and concern for people. So here's how Blake-Mouton ended up classifying it. Somebody who has high concern for production and low concern for people would be somebody who is considered an authority obedience manager. Maybe if they have low concern for production and low concern for people, they are an impoverished manager. If you have low concern for production but high concern for people, you're considered a country club manager, focused on people's needs, building relationships. And the ideal situation is you have both high concern for production and high concern for people, putting you as a teams manager, focusing on building participation and support for a shared purpose. And people in the middle ground end up being here. Where do you fit in? What kind of manager are you based upon this grid? I encourage you to pause and think. Where are you? Continuing past that assumption that leaders are born, we go into the assumption that people can learn and that leaders can improve. So here's a little bit of information on improving leadership style. Firstly, evaluation of a manager determines the position on the grid. After that is figured out, then we have to create a training program that is designed to shift the style to a preferred direction. So if we were to go back a slide, suppose you are here in the country club manager portion, you have low concern for production and high concern for people, you would have some sort of a training session that would be focused on how to improve your concern for high production. Blake Mouton called the preferred style the team manager, which is what we saw back here. Team manager is in the top right. High concern for production and high concern for people. Now, you could always go back to your careers in civics, and you'll probably remember these ones. These are your classic leadership styles. Autocratic, acts in a unilateral command and control fashion. Democratic, which would encourage participation with emphasis on both task accomplishment and development of people. And the final one, laissez-faire. Do the best you can and don't bother me attitude. That is it for this current one. The only thing I would add is that the leadership style that you apply will change according to the situation. You've got these questions here which will test your understanding of what you've just learned. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, reach out to me by email or send a message on Google Classroom. Enjoy for now.